This episode of Outdoor Journal Radio is brought to you in part by the Invasive Species Center, protecting Canada's land and water from invasive species, and Sail, the ultimate destination for your outdoor adventures. On the road again. I knew you were going to be tapping to that.
Just get with it on the road again.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Outdoor Journal Radio Podcast here on the Outdoor Journal Radio Podcast Network.
Come on now.
Get that in for sure. And another On the Road Again segment and another one without Angelo Viola. So as you can tell from this intro.
My.
Exactly, Georgie Borgie. Here this time we're very close to our last On the Road Again podcast that Ange and I did, which was on Lake Temagami. Only this time we're northwest of Lake Temagami on a lake called Lake Obabaca.
Give me a hell yeah!
Yeah, and it's very, very similar. It's called Near North in Ontario. And with me, along with Dean Taylor, is always here, is our good buddy, Steve Nizwicki. Hi,
Hey,
Stevie.
folks, how you
Give me a
doing?
hell yeah!
And this has been a very enlightening, very earth-shattering event here at Lake Obabaca, because we're shooting Fishing Canada television here too, obviously, and we'll get into it in a little bit. But yeah, it's been something that everybody that's a fan of the Fishing Canada show is going to definitely experience themselves later on in life in the 2025 season, whenever they listen to this, if this is pre-2025. But a little bit about the lake and a little bit about the lodge. I'll talk about the lake itself. Lake Obabaca is a typical, I guess it'd be an oligotrophic lake. It's a very deep lake trout style lake. That's the only way I can call it. That's when I see or hear and talking to my friends, they say, well, what kind of lake is this? It's a lake trout kind of lake. Big rocky cliffs, deep water, cold water, lots of stone and rock around it and all that kind of stuff. And we've fished. It's got in three parts, this lake, at the lodge itself. There's a shallow end. It's like a snowman, basically, if you look at it on a map almost. There's a shallow end, there's a mid area that's deep, and then there's the upper north end that's probably as deep or deeper than that. And this lake is so far, so we'll get into the fishing talk, it has been nothing short of unbelievable.
I agree.
It's been unreal.
Yeah, it's lived up to its what we were expecting for sure.
And then some, honestly. We targeted both smallmouth bass and lake trout. And honestly, we did so well on both species that right off the hop, I know Steve will say the same thing. We highly recommend coming to this lake. Lake Obabaca Lodge is it the only lodge on the lake?
It is the only lodge on the lake, and there's
is.
only actually 8 properties.
Yeah, on this whole 20-something kilometers or 30-something kilometers or miles. I'm not sure if it's miles or kilometers.
I'm pretty sure it's 24 kilometers long.
Yeah,
but it's wide and well, actually, like the snowman analogy, it narrows in a couple of spots, and you've got everything here, including fish schools that are ridiculous.
Yeah, it's such a cool. So for the smallmouth angler. First off, I'll break down this trip right off the hop. When I said it was unique, I'll get right into it. So, Ange tapped out of this shoot, and in doing so, we knew that Steve and Dean were going to come on the shoot, and Volva, our camera operator. But Ange gave Steve and Dean, he took a meeting with Dean and gave Stevie a call and said, "Hey boys, what do you think about hosting something on your own? Pete's going to go up there, but doesn't have to be on camera if you guys feel good about it." And both the guys, honestly, they just jumped at the opportunity. They said, "Yeah, hell yeah, coach, put me in there." So,
Give me a hell yeah!
Exactly. So we decided to do species-wise. So Stevie took on the smallmouth bass portion of it because he's got a lot of experience on smallies, and Dean took on the lake trout because he's got some experience on lake trout. I don't know how much Dean has or had. How would you say, a lot, Dino? Or
not in this scenario. Like, I lake trout fished when I lived in BC, but that was in rivers.
Yeah.
And it was in the fall when they were spawning.
Exactly, totally different.
Not intentionally targeting spawning fish, but out there, there's no.
Right.
It doesn't close.
Right.
So you can do it in the fall.
Right. So
we're
we're here in second week of August, basically, and it is hot as hell here. I mean, right now we're sitting in the shade right now, but honestly, if you went out in that sun right now and it's 5 o'clock in the evening, you'd cook yourself out there.
It's 29 degrees
every day. And as you can see from the lake behind us, it's flat, so there's no wind. So it's tough out there. It would be called tough conditions in anybody's frame of mind. And when you're going fishing, oh my God, it's so tough. You want to overcast, you want some wind, you want whatever like that. And honestly, the smallies have been on fire, and the Lakers were on fire. It was incredible. So we'll get into maybe the smallie part straight, Stevie, with you at first. Breaking down the lake. Let's look at the snowman. Talk us through the lake the way you
absolutely.
way you experienced it.
And first of all, while we're talking about this tough weather, we got here on day one, and by the end of this shoot, I was looking forward to this flat water, this hot, no wind, for one reason and one reason only. And I've experienced it a little, maybe on Lake Simcoe, but not like here with clear water and seeing the fish. It was like that part of this trip was the best part of the trip for me.
So you've never done that on Simcoe? You never sight fished on Simcoe?
Oh, absolutely. But the difference is on Simcoe, when you're sight fishing, you're actually moving and you're scanning shallower water for fish
with your eyeballs.
With your eyeballs.
Yeah.
And here we were scanning with the live scope and seeing them. And the very unique thing is 90% of these fish you'd see on the live scope, cast to them, and go into whatever retrieve and style of retrieve you wanted. And those fish, 90% of the time, followed you right to the boat in 65, 70 feet of water, and you could see them at the side. They come in like a wolf pack. And again, it goes back to the tournament days when you've got a second bait to go to. You pick up another rod and they're waiting for it at the side of the boat. And there were lots of times where you throw that bait out in that deep water and they're attacking it from different directions. And that was great. But the best part was the ones that were a little hesitant and you had to do different things with your bait, and you could actually see how they were reacting to it, which then, in my mind, changed the way that I would retrieve that bait, and then you would get onto them out there.
That's a great lesson for everybody to learn. What Steve says, he watched the fish. If one thing didn't work, you just, even with that same bait, they're interested, you change things up as you're going.
That's right.
On the cuff or off the cuff or whatever you want to call it. It's just in a natural state. Okay, I got to do something different. Watch, and you watch that fish, and if it commits, I've got it. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah, in the moment, you're there with one bait, and we had a number of occasions where the smallies would almost hit the lure with their nose with a closed mouth and bump it, and you're like, oh my God, and swipe at it, and then so you switch that bait, and the thing is, they're still there. They're with the boat. Like, there was probably times when for 3 to 5 minutes, those fish were within sight of the boat. And that was the coolest part of this whole experience.
Yeah, I compared them. Steve's a muskie guy. And I compared these smallies to muskies as being probably the only other fish I've ever seen that weren't afraid of a 20-foot boat.
No.
Like, they came to the boat, and they stuck around the boat. Like, they stopped when you pull the baits out of the water. By the way, Stevie did another muskie move in the shallow water. He figure-eighted a smallmouth bass right in front of me. He dropped that rod tip down there, figure-eight. I said, what is he doing, this idiot? Boom! I got him! That was the best, buddy.
I know.
That was cool.
And you know what? That
was
situation that Peter just described, with him in the seat saying, you're an idiot, happened to me on the first shoot I did at Chaudière with Angelo Viola. And I didn't actually catch that smallie, but I figure-eighted the smallie, and Ange had the same reaction. Now I finally put one. I put a smallmouth in the boat on a figure-eight.
Oh, that was awesome, buddy. And that was so. Stevie broke down the deep part of the lake. So that was the deep north part of the lake. And these are these open water smallmouth bass that are feeding on this lake. It's rainbow smelt is the main forage for these fish. So we tried to imitate those as much as we could. And we used Yo-Zuri baits for the most part. We did some Ned rigging. We did some Senkoing. Sometimes you have to do that on, especially those following fish that aren't going to eat something else. You have to do that, right? But we want to stick to our sponsors as best we can. And Yo-Zuri is a great sponsor, so we use
and they're
as
great
much
baits.
as we could. Oh my God,
there's really
you popped a big one on a top water. We got them on everything. Like honestly, that figure 8 was on a jerk bait. We got them on rattle baits. We got
those
them on
new
2 different types of rattle baits.
minnow baits.
Yeah, those weighted minnow baits that are just hitting the market next year. So we caught them on pretty much everything out there. But the that figure 8 fish came off a sandbar. So there's an area that separates the south end, from the bottom of the Snowman in our case, from the middle section, and it's a great big giant sandbar that everybody knows about. The whole lodge knows about it, et cetera, et cetera. But this thing loads up in typical smallmouth fashion in the summertime. Smallies, for some reason, they are very much attracted to sand. And I don't know if there's something in there that they're eating, if they like the feel of it on their bellies. I don't know. I've never figured it out. Something is weird about it. But they load up, and we actually, the hotspot on the show is probably going to be on that sandbar because there were so many in that one spot there. But that's where Stevie pulled that figure 8. And basically, you drive along with your trolling motor. And there you don't need your live scope on that because it's 5 feet of water. You know,
truly
a lot of that
sight
is,
fishing.
Yeah, it's truly sight. And you see a black blob or a dark blob on a light bottom, and you just say, okay, I got to cast to them. Sometimes they bite, sometimes they won't, but it's a very unique pattern that happens in a lot. Like if your lake has smallmouth and it has sand, you're probably going to have smallmouth on sand. It happens that often. Yeah. It happens that often. So, and then this end here that you see behind us, for those that are watching on YouTube, this is a real shallow, and this is almost, I'd call it almost like a largemouth type of lake without all the pads and all that kind of stuff. It's shallow, a lot of weeds.
Rock piles.
Rock piles. The water's a little dirtier down here and all that. And again, this was a place where we were throwing, shallow minnow baits,
jerk baits,
top waters, all that kind of stuff, and just working rock, like Steve said, rock piles. There's a rock humps, there's some weed transitions, and all that stuff. And the lake's got it all. It's that much fun.
Oh, for sure, and especially down at this end, there are some isolated areas where you get down to 30 feet, and I caught a couple of nice ones. Again, with the scope, those were deep fish, and I dropped down to them, and they hit. But this end of the lake is shallow for the most part, like that 10 feet shallow.
Yeah, it's like different lakes, basically.
Yeah.
It gives you, if you want to go for a fish after supper at the lodge, which they totally encourage, you can go out here and catch 10 smallmouth after supper like nothing. You know what I mean?
For sure.
So easy in the shallow stuff. So.
Well, when we asked where the fish were, and we asked a number of different people from the lodge here, the resounding answer was everywhere. And I really didn't that's an answer that you always get. But this place, truly, they were everywhere.
Yeah, they really were.
And on multiple different patterns.
That was the best part about it. No matter what we really tried, as long as we were on fish, we were almost catching them all, right? You know what I mean?
Right.
So it was very cool. Now we could do. What do you want to go to next? The lodge, or do you want to go to the lake trout stuff? What do you think?
What do you think, Dino? Let's let Dino choose. He's the.
Want to talk Lakers, Dino?
We can talk a little bit of Lakers. Sure.
A little bit of Lakers. Okay, so Dean, obviously, what I said, Ange had a meeting with the Dean and a phone call with Stevie, and Dean jumped at the opportunity and says, "Hey, do you want to do some on camera on your own? With no Pete Bowman, no Stevie, no nothing, no Ange." And Dean said, "Yeah, I'd like to try that." So, so that was the second part of the shoot. We set it up on Lake Trout. We knew Lake Trout going. We didn't know what to expect. We just came from Temagami, where we caught few fish, but they were absolute giants. It was a ridiculous big fish show. We weren't expecting that because the lake trout fishery had been closed here for 20 years previous to our visit here. About 3 years ago, they just opened it up. So we knew that this was a fishery in dire need of help, and when they closed it down. And then so Dino, we said, "Hey, what about lake trout?" And he says, "Yeah, I am in." So Dino, what do you think? How did your lake trouting go in your opinion?
Yeah, well,
here?
first, the experience has been kind of weird because, well, one, I never really expected to end up hosting. Like when I started with you guys, I've just been behind the scenes. I've been doing the podcast and stuff. So to be thrown into the on-camera stuff by myself was kind of intimidating at first because I never, you're almost talking to yourself.
Right.
Because you're trying not to refer to the camera operator. You're trying not to refer to Pete or Steve behind the camera. Mm-hmm. So the thought of out there talking to yourself on the deck, because when I go out by myself, I'm just silent all day, obviously.
Right.
So it's it was interesting experiencing that, like actually trying to walk through what you're doing and stuff was new.
Right.
Which was cool, actually. It was actually felt more natural than I thought it would.
Yeah, let me just tell the audience, the boys both did a great job, because this was Steve's first shot by himself as well. So it wasn't, you know what I mean, Steve's co-hosted. He's had guides with him, so Ange and Pete weren't with him, but he's had guides with him. So
it's easy to have somebody to talk to, right? And help you carry the conversation.
Oh, God, yeah.
And then
a guide is so perfect for you, because he's got all the knowledge of the lake, and he's got a personality, and all of a sudden they bounce back and forth, and
experiences.
Yeah. But Dino did a crackerjack of a job. I told Dean, I said, okay, we have to try our best to do Yo-Zuri, and I came up with an idea. I says, the only way I can think of this for our vertical, we weren't going to troll them. We wanted to vertical jig them because we wanted to put used to the live scope and the Garmin stuff and all that. And trolling is, you know, it's a hit or miss. It's a great technique, but it's not as exciting, honestly, as vertical jigging. So I said, okay, we got a vertical jig. Let's look at the lineup that we have of rattle baits that Yo-Zuri has given us to work with. And I looked
bass
through the
baits,
box.
by the way.
Yeah, bass baits, just typical rattle baits. What do you call it? What else would it be called?
Lipless crank.
Lipless crankbait, yeah. So I looked through the box, and I saw this one model called One Knock. And it's basically, it's a rattle bait, but it's only got one bead in it. So it's not this rattly type of stuff that they're normally associated with. And I looked through the box, and there was a nice silver one with blue, a silver one with black back, and all that stuff. And there was one there that was purple, a psychedelic purple and white, and I think a chartreuse belly on it. And I says, I bet she's going to choose that. And Dean says, that one right there, that purple one. I want to try that one. So we grabbed it up and doctored. I doctored it up for him. I brought in some lead wrap. What do you call it? Lead, is it wrap or what is it?
No, it's wire.
Lead wire.
Like a wire that, just
it
but
looks
you wrap
like
hooks.
solder.
Yeah, it looks like solder. So I wrapped each of the hooks in this thing, and I put 2 Storm suspend strips on the belly of it to get it down, because we're fishing in 80 feet of water, 60 feet of water sometimes. And Dino, you chose that bait, and
oh man,
did it work?
It actually ended up the only thing that did work. Like, we played around a little. I mean, you could get other baits to go eventually, but that thing was like, if that thing was in the water and 2 others were, they were going for that.
Yeah, they were. They were fused.
All over it.
I used a blueback with silver just to try it out, and it worked good in the morning when I dropped the boys off. You can talk about that experience too with your with the native when you did that thing. That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
But I went out when I dropped the boys off to do a thing. I dropped that silver blueback down, and I was cracking them good at first in the morning. But once Dean threw that Mr. Purple down there, whatever the color is called, we'll make sure we tell it on Fishing Canada. Man, that thing was lights out, and we only had one.
Yeah.
So Dean had to retie it about
and it
20
broke
times.
off at one point
in the net.
And I had a fish in the net that you'll see on camera that was just making a mess, and the bait was flying all over.
Oh yeah, we're
somehow
panicking.
Stayed in the net.
It somehow stayed in the net because it was the only one we have. I don't know why of that color, but it just
that seems to always be the way. Anything that's on, you only have one.
Yep.
Always.
Yeah, for sure. So, but so you got. Well, basically, tell the technique. You can go through it.
Yeah. So we were fishing deeper stuff. This is kind of how I've lake trout fished in the past, but it's never as action-packed as this. So essentially, we're going out, we're looking for like breaks, but like deep breaks. So if it goes from 40 feet down to 80, we're fishing like the wall and trying to figure out what the depth is. But when you're fishing traditional, normally you're looking for multiple hooks. Like, you would never stop on just a single hook. It's never worthwhile almost. Mm-hmm. But this time with live scope, you are looking for those individual marks. Like the schooling ones seem to be a lot smaller. And this is kind of what we found in Temagami. The bigger fish are on their own. They don't want the competition. Mm-hmm. And apparently they cannibalize each other a lot.
I was going to say they're bullies too, right?
So,
they'll kick the shit out of the small ones. They'll eat them.
Yeah.
I've seen it in the Great Bear Lake.
Yeah.
Like I've seen 30-pound lake trout with a 10-pound lake trout in his mouth.
Yeah.
That's pretty extreme. You know?
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
So if you're a little guy, maybe they don't want to be around the big ones.
Yeah,
that's
true.
Probably it, yeah.
So we were trying to pick apart. We weren't looking for schools. I mean, we sat on a few schools just in case, because we didn't know what to expect out here. We knew there would be bigger fish out here, but not Temagami-sized monsters or like Northwest Territory-sized monsters. At least we thought. Because when you hear about a big fish here, we were hearing 10, 14 pounds. We won't reveal what we ended up catching, I don't think, but it was a lot bigger than that.
Yeah, Dino,
We found a big fish.
He put one on camera that looks pretty damn good, that's for sure. So
so the technique ended up working, and this is something that I'm going to replicate as like everywhere now. I have so many lakes that I've assumed only had small lake trout. I mean, this one's a little bit unique because they did close it for so long. But you look at lakes like Lake Muskoka or Lake Joe or any of like the popular like water ski deep lakes, people don't touch those lake
Anything
trout.
that's got lake trout in it, quote, lake trout are in our lake, they're
there's
untouched.
got to be some big fish down there.
And again, I'll go back to it. Most people troll for these fish,
Yeah.
right? There's not a whole lot of people that
And
that do
downrig.
that.
Yeah.
Downrig
Yeah.
troll, yeah. So, but when you lay that live scope out there, I'm telling you, and I know we keep harping on it. Ange and I are the worst for it, and harping. But I'm telling you what, it's not only is it extremely effective, not only does it not catch every fish because everybody thinks you do, but I'll tell you, when you do catch fish, it's the most fun you're going to have fishing. As you guys both saw, it is for the smallmouth and especially for the Lakers. I know when we were doing the Lakers stuff, just getting onto it at first. Dino was coaxing some, and he was doing the jigging thing and all that stuff. And I had a tip from all my buddies. They said, reel that bait away from him. If he's chasing up, don't let him catch up to your bait. Just reel it away from him. Keep reeling it away from that fish, which is so unnatural to do. So I saw one coming up on Dean's bait, and he did a couple like that. And I said, Dean, reel it up. Just keep reeling it. And the first time he did it, boom, he goes, oh my God. And he just set that hook into that fish. And that was the technique of the week from after that.
yeah.
Dino just
sure.
did it on almost every one. One fish came down after the bait. One fish was above it and came down on it, and that was a competition today.
If you can get a bunch eating, then it seems like it doesn't matter what you do, but because they're competing for the bait, and you're going to get whichever one is just more aggressive to take it.
Right.
But if it's just the one, if you stop the bait, they totally lose interest.
They hate it. They don't want
hate
it.
Yeah.
Or even shake it or do anything different. All you have to do is reel it straight up and bring it right to the surface. And I swear to God, it's the most freaky technique.
And you might have to repeat it like 5 or 6 times. Like the big one we got, we probably had it come up, 5 or 6 times before it eventually
That's
ate.
right. You
It
worked
takes
on
a lot
that
of
fish.
convincing.
You took a lot of time on that fish. So, and we got, by the way, when this lake trout portion of the show airs on Fishing Canada, hopefully we got the recording. So we recorded our Garmin screens. We have that active captain, and so we're going to try and insert that. We get Joe, the editor, to insert that into the show because I think it's going to just show people. It's going to blow their minds.
Well, that's
how
the
this
magic.
works, right? It's just going to blow their minds how these lake trout are so predictable almost.
Yeah.
Like the ones that are hot are very predictable. And I'll tell you what, you think a trout is a finicky, finessey fish? We're throwing bass rattle baits and reeling it up at 10 mile, not 10 mile an hour, but 1 mile an hour, 2 mile an hour, and they're cracking it and hitting it so hard, they're crushing it, right?
Yeah.
So,
And the thing because I'm always like a tube jig guy. Like I love fishing big tube jigs. But the thing that has kind of convinced me with the rattle baits is that you don't have to be on them, because what we do find a lot is they get spooked by the boat. So if you're trying to be right on top of them with a tube or trying to cast out and trying to be accurate, it's a lot harder than if you can be like 40 or 50 feet away and call them in, because we were calling these fish all the way across the screen. Like the range on these is like 110 feet, and you'd see them cruise all the way in.
Yeah, which Dean means is that rattling part of that whole deal. So they might not see it. They might be faced the other way. Even if they're 30 feet away, they won't see that bait if they're not looking that way. When they all of a sudden, you give it a couple of good shots, and all of a sudden, oh my God, he's starting to come over. It's
and
like
you
it was
watch them
freaky.
like completely stop and turn.
Yeah.
It's so fun.
And the beauty of a rattle bait too. We'll get technical here. Versus, let's say, rattle bait versus a tube. Nothing against a tube because it's a great lake trout lure. But a tube, normally to work properly, it spirals down. It goes down in a big circle and spirals down. Well, if lake trout are off even a little bit, from what I've heard from a lot of people, they don't like that spiraling down. They'd rather have it going straight down.
It's super unnatural.
It's super unnatural, and they have a harder time hitting it too. Now it's going in this weird pattern that's going down. These rattle baits go straight down, and they also shimmy on the way down. They go this little all the way, like it looks like a bait fish that's been injured. So, and I know people do use rattle baits, like walleye guys through the ice and lake trout guys, some of them, but not a lot do through the open water season and all that. And I think we're going to open up a lot of eyes with this one.
Yeah,
You know what
and
I mean?
the other thing I will say, because the reason I avoided it in the past with the rattle baits, when you jig them straight up and down, you tend to hook yourself.
Right.
But the lead wraps on the hook, especially a lead wrap on the back hook.
Yeah.
I don't think I tangled myself once.
Exactly,
Like, it was
not
so
by catching myself,
smooth.
yeah.
Because that's the worst, when you drop 80 feet down and you jig up and there's no out. You're like,
Yeah,
oh, I know.
I just wasted 2
Yeah.
minutes getting down there.
I never experienced that in 4 days we were here.
We need to get Chris at Yozuri to make us an ounce and a half in a kind of a compact rattlebait size, almost that
Yeah.
same size, maybe a little bigger. They might have to go a little bit bigger, but there's got to be a way of weighting one down, that you can buy for lake trout. You know what I mean? Because that would in Canada that'd be a big seller. I think.
yeah.
After
Especially
went
now, I
oh
mean,
my God, what we just saw.
I'd buy 100 of them. Probably.
Yeah, exactly. So,
And it goes back to the live scope. Like I'm sitting here listening to you guys talk, and everything that you've said happens on the live scope, because on traditional, like I've fished lake trout for years, not for a few years, but in my younger years, we used to fish lake trout all the time, and you'd look for the hooks, right? And then you would drop the tube down or drop a flutter spoon down, and you'd be jigging away. Number one, that reel, when you retrieve it back, and that's what it is. It's a horizontal retrieve, and you imagine that you're a bait fish in a spot you don't want to be, and then you actually watch the reactions of those fish. And that big fish that you caught, you said I coaxed it back 3 or 4 times. While in traditional which there's still a place for it, but with the traditional sonar, you would have never coaxed it back 3 or 4 times because you didn't know it was there.
good point.
That's in the past.
Yeah.
The traditional sonar is that hook that you're looking at your sonar, which is now in the middle of your screen because it's a piece of paper scrolling by you, basically. What's live is right at the front as it's moving by. With the live scope, it's totally not that, and you'll see when we cut it together. I certainly hope that we can get Joe to do that, because, or just go to YouTube. I'm sure we'll find it. You can find stuff like that there too.
Oh, for sure.
But the coaxing of these fish, I love catching fish. But I got to tell you, it was as exciting for me to be standing behind the screen in the back of the boat watching Dean coax this fish in, and then it was like, oh my God, here it comes again. And you see it swipe at it, and then Dean, oh no, he didn't touch it, and then he coaxes it back, and then you hear, oh, here it goes, Zzz, and he's got it on, and you see it all unfold. And that is the magic and the power of this technology. And not only that, it's picking out those bigger fish too, because again, that big fish, it was there might have been 1 or 2 that we stopped on, and then it appeared, right? Or but you wouldn't do that normally.
No.
Oh God, no! That was the biggest fish we saw too on the screen, for sure.
You
and
knew
Dean caught
it looked like a salmon.
Yeah.
Like the way you can see, the way we've been able to tell size is you see the body like you do every other fish, like a pretty distinct blob. But if you see like a faint one that's coming in and out behind it, that's normally the tail. And if it's big enough to be a mark, it's a big fish. Like you can see it like fluttering.
Yeah, you can actually see him wagging it, like not wagging, waving the tail a little bit. It's like swimming, the swimming action on the tail.
Like if you can distinguish the head from the tail on a mark, it's big.
We interrupt this program to bring you the much anticipated bonus code for the latest Fishing Canada giveaways. This week's code is LAKER. All caps, L-A-K-E-R. Laker, a.k.a. the lowly old gray lake trout. Just type that in the bonus code section of the contest and receive 100 free entries towards all of our current giveaways. For those of you who aren't entered yet, what are you waiting for? Head over to fishingcanada.com while you listen to the rest of this episode. Click contests and sign up for all the latest Fishing Canada giveaways. And now, back to the episode. I'll tell you guys an experience. I don't know if I've ever told you guys this story. Probably my very first jigging lake trout experience. We were up on Selwyn Lake, which is on Northwest Territories, maybe Nunavut now, I'm not sure, but it's on the border. on one of the, maybe Manitoba, Northwestern. Anyways, it's way up there. And went to Selwyn Lake Lodge and did the trolling thing. And the big fish we did back then, we did the trolling thing with the three-way swivel rig and a poor man's downrigger and all that stuff. And we did catch our biggest fish by doing that. But the guide there said, you want to go catch a bunch? And we said, yeah, sure, why not? Reno and I. We said, yeah, let's go. Let's catch a bunch. And we get there, and he says, okay, there's gonna, and he had, back then, was just traditional, right? That's all they had. He says, well, I'm going to put you over about 100 fish right now. I said, what? He's going to put you over about 100 fish right now. Drop down, and he said, what are you throwing? I said, I threw a Mr. Champ spoon, and Reno threw, I think, a tube jig. We dropped them down, and we were jigging on the bottom, and we're not getting anything. We're saying, you're full of shit. There can't be 100 fish here. And he says, okay, now watch. And he took, and this is where I learned that retrieve, that first retrieve we were talking about. He took about 1.5 ounce to 2 ounce bucktail jig, it had rabbit fur on it. I think he put a piece of rabbit fur on it or something like that. And he just had a bait caster. You push the button, and the thing drops straight down. It's 100 feet of water.
Yeah.
I remember this distinctly. It's 90 to 100 feet, no matter where we worked around that area. Thump, the thing hit the bottom. He clicked his bail, gave it about 1 or 2 jigs, put his rod down on the gunnel of the boat, and just went all the way up to the top. Right to the top so he could see his bait. Nothing. Clicks his button. Exact same thing. On that second or third time, that thing stopped about 10 feet below the surface. I said, what in the... I couldn't believe it. I said, well, this is not real. Ever fishing 100 feet of water, and this guy caught a fish in 20 feet of water. How is that possible? Takes it off. He starts laughing, does it again. Boom, boom. After about 10 of these fish, we said, okay, obviously we got to start doing this. So I think we moved around to different types of baits and all that. But honest to God, and then every time you do that, with every third reel in, it took forever. If you had a small bait, it took forever to get down. So that's why he used that big jig. It got down real fast. You'd peel that thing up, and every third cast, those things chase it up so fast, and that's the only time they'll hit it, is on the way up, and like it's just escaping, like Dina's saying or Steve was saying, one of you guys said that, on the horizontal, on the lift. It's like it's leaving, and it fools them. It's
a horizontal
teases
retrieve.
them into biting.
Yeah.
It's getting away, and it is so effective. So just keeping that in mind when you're lake trout fishing. If you're jigging for lake trout, you don't have all this fancy stuff that we're using. I highly recommend just reeling straight up, 3/4 of the way up at least, so you can see your bait, and then dropping it back down. It sounds like a waste of time, and you don't have to do it real fast. Just reel it up at a decent pace, not slow, at a decent pace, like it's trying to get away from the bottom, and you're going to catch lake trout for sure.
Well, when you think about it, if you're a school of bait and there's lake trout underneath, and the lake trout want to start to feed on that bait, and they come up, what naturally will the bait do when something's coming from the bottom? They're going to go up.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, true.
So,
yeah. But that's not to say all lake trout hit like that, because a lot of them eat off the bottom. They're a scavenger too, right? They will eat. Well, they eat burbot.
That goes back to
they eat burbot big time.
And the dead herring trick.
Herring, exactly, all that stuff. So it's
it's almost like there's two types of lake trout.
You're probably right.
Because you do find the ones that if it's not below them, they won't pick it up.
Yep.
And other ones that you cannot be on bottom. It's just weird.
Yeah, it is. It's like these smallmouth here. You got 2 types of smallies here. You really do. You have 2 distinct types. You have the open water pelagic fish that are after these rainbow smelt, and then you've got the typical smallmouth that we had some kicking out crayfish and stuff like that. So that's typical of fishing. Let's go down to Lake Obabaca Lodge. Stevie, you're an ex-lodge owner.
Yeah.
You know all about this. Give us the lowdown. What do you think about this place?
Well, first and foremost, I just want to mention the fishery itself, and the smallmouth fishing and lake trout fishing here, I think from opener to close is hot, man.
There's no opener on smallmouth. It's open all year, buddy. Remember that?
Hey, I'm not used to fishing that. Yeah.
That's even better, right?
Oh, yeah.
The pre-spawn here would be insane.
It would be insane.
Can you imagine? And the visibility.
Yeah.
Oh.
You could see beds from half a mile away.
Yeah.
And
With that pre-spawn, oh my God.
The amazing part too, I don't know when lake trout open up here. Probably the trout openers normally end of April.
Yeah.
But at that time of year, you might get smallies and lake trout actually mixed in the same schools.
Yeah. Oh, I think you would.
Because right now you have them in the same areas.
Yeah.
But not in the same location in the water.
Right.
At that time of year, you might.
Well, you'd have lake trout up in the shallows, right after the turnover for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I just want to say this lake, above any that I've seen, I don't think it matters when you come. From when they open the doors here to when they close the doors here.
Yes, lake trout close on Labor Day, but
yeah.
you still have a smallmouth fishery if they
and
stay open beyond
too.
that. Yeah, so I mean the smallies in the fall here would be incredible. As long as they stay open here at the lodge, you'd have a heyday. So
and there's and the thing is too, there's big fish here, no doubt, but the average size fish is a lot bigger than the average smallmouth anywhere that I've been. Like, I mean, consistently, you can go out there and catch 2.5 to 3.5 pounders consistently and high numbers.
Yep.
But so I just wanted to mention that. Number two, this place is as close to, and this is what I like to say about Chaudière when I owned it. It's as close to a fly out fishing experience that you'll get with. I had boat 2 access, which was very short. This has road access, and the road in here it's a long road. There's only 2 launches on this lake, and one of them is at Obabaca, and the other is at one of the 6 cottages on the whole lake right next door. Shares the same basically the same laneway. So you are buried in the north. And not only that, the north end of it is on Obabaca Lake Provincial Park, which is some of the only old growth forest left. So the feel when you're here is very isolated and secluded.
And it's a good thing that road is that dirt road. You always say, "Oh my God, this road is taking forever." That's a good thing, folks. Because it keeps a lot of the riffraff out. It keeps a lot of guys that want to come up from, let's say, I don't know how far is North Bay from here. Would they make that
2
as a
hours.
day trip? So some people could make it a day trip, but when you add in that long dirt road, it keeps a lot of people out. You know what I mean? So it's a nice private feeling.
And the boat ramp here, by the way, is not publicly
accessible.
It's
private. Everything is private.
So don't come all the way down here and hoping to launch your boat.
There's nobody here to take your money, and you're not getting in.
You stay at the lodge for a day or two, then
which you definitely should.
More than welcome to.
And now I'll get into the nuts and bolts of this place. The accommodation is really outstanding.
Oh, God.
The cottages here are beautiful on the outside. They're beautiful on the inside. And the one that we're in, and I think they're all the same. They're full log cottages. And although we've told you that it's, the last 3 days have been from 25 to 30 degrees during the day. And the first day we come back, we walked in and it felt like we were in air conditioning. So the cottage was cool. Beautiful. They're appointed beautifully. They do both housekeeping and American plan. The food has been outstanding.
Really good.
Scotty and Jill, they're running the place and managing it. And honestly, last night we told Scotty that we were thinking about going out early and not to worry for breakfast, and we said, you know what? We'll just skip breakfast. 5 minutes later, Jill was at our front door saying, "Hey guys, listen, can I make you anything?
Can I stock your fridge?
Yeah, I'll make it for you right now, and I'll put it in your fridge so you can take it with you in the morning." And we were worried about Vova, and we were going to wake him up and everything, but we just said, no, we're good, because we were going to come back in for lunch.
Don't forget Mike too. Mike the dock.
Mike the dock.
And the guide and everything here. He's a jack of all trades. He makes the coffee in the morning for us. He's just a super guy, man. Super guy, and he knows his fishing really well. That guy, if you want to talk fishing when you come here, make sure you talk to Mike, because he knows this lake real well. He knows the species really well too. So I want to give him a shout out for sure.
And Chef Daryl.
Oh my God,
the food has been
the only East Coaster we know that doesn't eat seafood. He doesn't eat anything from the water. He can cook it, but he won't eat it.
That's right. So as an experience as a whole, I can't say enough about Lake Obabaca Lodge.
It's fantastic. We've had a great stay here.
And it's always hard because we're not a typical guest, right? But we've seen other people here, and we've heard what they say. And my good buddy Tommy Boy and Nolan back home, they've been coming here since the Chaudière days, and they've told me over and over, you got to get to Lake Obabaca. You got to get to Lake Obabaca, you know. And finally, I'm here, and I certainly wasn't disappointed. So
this is a great place. We highly recommend this place. I mean, there's no doubt about it. This is one of those places. We can skirt around a lot of places that are a little bit iffy, a little bit this, that, and the other. You know what I mean? If maybe the accommodations, maybe the meals, maybe the fishing, but this place has got it all.
Oh,
so
it's got a games room.
We haven't even been in there yet.
No, I know. I hear it, and all of the woodworking and details everywhere have been great. Like it's really a beautiful spot.
Do you know what else you want to talk about aside from this before I get to this?
So before you get to that, I think there's two pieces of paper in your hand, and I do want to get to that now because we've talked about a bunch of baits right now.
Yeah.
And we get people writing in all the time that, hey, you talk about the Yo-Zuri baits, but where do I buy them? And we do have a sponsor on board now where you can buy them.
Beauty. You want to do it, Stevie?
I can give her a shot.
Absolutely, bud.
All right. Now, everybody watching, I am reading here, so this has been sprung on me. But we'll see how it goes. Head to your local sales store today or bookmark their website at sale.ca for up to 50% off selected items. That sounds pretty good, buddy.
You are a reader, man. You're good.
I'm gonna bookmark that in my phone right now because I gotta go buy some Yo-Zuri baits there, baby.
Kidding. I know Dean's going already too. I know exactly what he's getting.
He was asking about it.
I know.
By the time this airs, keep an eye out for some start of the season hunting sales.
There you go, folks. Thank you very much to Sale, obviously. Thanks, Stevie, for reading that.
Hey, no problem.
Sale for being a great sponsor.
But that is more than an ad because in Canada, unfortunately, it is actually hard to find the product.
Yo-Zuri is very hard to find.
Sale does have it. Their online store now is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, Yo-Zuri's obviously trying to get in as many places as they possibly can. We found that the Sale store in Oshawa, that their wall has tripled in the last year or so, ever since Ange and I have been pumping it out on Fishing Canada for sure. And it's just getting better and better and more baits all the time. So, and we highly recommend them and go to Sale to buy them. So, fan question of the day brought to you by fishfindermounts.com.
Come on,
nice.
My friend. Yeah, they're in
I
full
like
fledged
those.
too. Oh,
we should talk about that too.
How about after this one? We'll talk about that very quick. But this is a good one for you, Stevie. I'll ask this to you. This is from James Runkle from Pennsylvania via email. info@fishingcanada.com for those that want to send us an email question or Facebook or Instagram pages for Fishing Canada. Stephen, what's your equipment advice for first-time muskie fishermen?
James, that's a great question, honestly. My advice for first-time muskie anglers, number one, you need to decide whether you want to troll or cast because those are two different rigs altogether. And I do a lot of trolling. I've got my kids. I've taught them to troll throughout the years. Number one, you want a good setup. 9-foot rod, but and a decent reel. You don't have to go out and break the bank.
Bait casting or spinning?
Always bait. Well, I always go bait casting.
Okay.
You can get spinning rods, but for trolling, I would stay away from a spinning rod. Bait casting. Good heavy trolling rod, fiberglass are good for that.
Do you need a 9-footer, really?
No, you don't. But it depends. It depends what you're doing. If you're going to be by yourself in the boat and holding on to the rod, no, you don't need a 9-footer. If you've got 3 or 4 kids like me and you're trolling with multiple rods, it's nice to have your outside rods being a little longer to spread your baits.
Yep.
But again, that's for trolling. And that's not the real piece of advice that I want to give you. The real piece of advice that I want to give you is don't cheap out on the terminal tackle. Your snap swivels, your leaders, your line, all of that stuff is crucial because when you start to get into this type of fishing, your shot is just as good as any shot of catching the fish of a lifetime. Mm-hmm. And you don't want to hook up with that fish of a lifetime and be battling a 52 or 55 inch, 40-pound muskie. And then all of a sudden with all of the excitement, the line just goes, and you reel it in and your snap has opened. Mm-hmm. So, and it happens, believe me.
Oh my God, it happens.
It happens all the time. And
lot.
then you look at yourself and you say, I just invested, anywhere from a couple $100 to a couple $1,000 in equipment, rods, reels, baits, your boat, your everything, and I just lost the fish of a lifetime on a 50-cent piece of equipment. So the real advice is look after the terminal tackle. Make sure and make sure you've got the proper tools. With these big fish, you're dealing with big hooks. Have bolt cutters in the boat, because sometimes it's far better to cut the shank of a hook if you can't get it out of the fish, and just leave that bit of hook in its mouth and put them back that way, because you can do a little bit of damage to those fish by tearing and yanking and
you can always replace your hook.
That's right.
You can't replace a 50-inch muskie if he dies, right?
No, so. and those though they'll back out. They'll be okay. So your tools, your terminal tackle, and
I got
decent,
one more.
Yeah,
line. Give me a line. Give James line.
James, so for line, typically I would buy a good fluorocarbon leader, 120-pound test.
Yo-Zuri makes that, by the way.
Yes, Yo-Zuri. Yo-Zuri makes all this line. The line that I use, by the way. And then I usually go with 80 to 100-pound braid, and that's what I use for trolling. And I run that. The nice thing about the braid especially is I run planer boards on my 2 wide lines. So that braid, you've got good contact with those fish, and you want good contact with those fish. Let the hooks do what they're made to do, and let the speed of the troll, typically anywhere from 3 to 5 mile an hour, that braid sets right into those fish, and let the rod do the stretching and work a lot of guys will talk about mono and how they like the stretch of the mono.
Not in that situation.
In this situation, you want your braid, you want to get that great hook set, and then let that rod do the work. Like the 9-footer I was talking about, like a 7-footer, whatever. Those rods are built to take the force of those fish. Let the rod do that. Make sure you've got great line, Yo-Zuri, 80 to 100-pound test, 120-pound fluoroliters, great snaps, and you'll do just fine.
There you go, James. Remember the big thing he said there, don't cheap out. If you're going to don't buy 10 liters, buy 2 really, really good liters.
Absolutely.
Or whatever. Just don't cheap out on it, because it's a life-altering moment when
and
you lose that big fish.
And at the end of the day, it's really not that expensive when you look at it.
No.
If you spent $10 on a leader, some of these baits are $150, $200, $300 for a bait. Yeah. There's guys out there that have that setup just so they don't lose the $300
of course.
Bait on the end of your line.
Yeah, and they won't lose that bait.
And if you're starting out, you're not spending $300 on a bait. Don't get me wrong. Drifter, buy a stalker or a believer.
Yeah, nice. Those are a great price. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
I'm sure Sale has them too.
Yeah, they do. Sale has everything. They have a great selection of musky stuff, actually. That's from James Runkle from Pennsylvania. Again, info@fishingcanada.com, Fishing Canada Facebook, Instagram. What do we got? What is it called? At Fishing Canada?
At Fishing Canada Official. Yeah.
At Fishing Canada Official on Instagram. And send us in questions, and we will hopefully get to read yours. And thank you for that. So, anything else, boys, before we wrap her up? Is there anything else we need to cover?
Oh, I think we're good.
Yeah, I think we're
good. We'd like to thank also Go Fish in Ontario, because this is one of our Ontario segments, so we can't forget them. They've been with us for a long time too. So and they're supporting us well. And this is one of our destinations that they help us. So Destination Ontario, Go Fish in Ontario. So they're on Facebook as well. So
Carol Caputo, the Queen.
Carol, we love Carol.
Queen of the North.
Carol. I love you, Carol. I love you. Here we go. There's our music, folks. Thanks very much for listening and watching. And if you're watching us, thanks to Steve Niswiki and Dean Taylor, our newest Fishing Canada hosts, not co-hosts, hosts. And we will talk to you next time.
This episode of Outdoor Journal Radio has been brought to you in part by the Invasive Species Center, protecting Canada's land and water from invasive species, and Sail, the ultimate destination for your outdoor adventures.